camera. How many of you remember the movie The Deer Hunter with Robert De Niro in it? Do you remember that winter setting in the city, the steel mill city where he grew up? That was exactly like Canton, Ohio, the city that I grew up in. Now I tell you this story because I was a young Irish Catholic living next to a steel mill, just down the road from where they made the roller bearings for all of the cars, and a real short distance from where they made all the rubber products for their cars. So we always had smoke, railroad trains, big trucks going through. One of my classmates who lived on the complete other side of town, when I was in about the second or third grade, came to stay overnight at the house. And in the morning, he said, how do you sleep? There's trains going by. There's big trucks making all kinds of noise. The steel mill's going clang, clang, clang as it's cutting the big sheets of steel. I had no problem sleeping. We learn to adapt, and the things that happen to us young, sometimes we don't realize how much of an impact they're really going to have on our life. How many of you can remember your favorite teacher that had an impact on you when you were young? Mine was my 5th grade teacher. Now, as I told you, I'm an Irish Catholic kid. I grew up on the streets. Now I'm going to a Catholic grade school. So for the first 4 years, I had the nuns. Now, you know all those stories that you've heard about Catholic school and the nuns? They're true. Back of the head, quicker than you could shake a stick. Screw up, back of the head. And they used to walk around with these habits on. Now, let me tell you, underneath those habits was a complete arsenal that the Army would envy. Mess up, Mr. Cummins. There were 2 different people that called me 2 different names that brought fear to me. One was the nuns. Mr. Cummins, put your hands out. And that ruler came from nowhere. The other one was my mother. And anytime I heard the words, Dirk Patrick Cummins, nothing good was coming from that conversation at all. It was like, can I get out the door quick enough without getting caught? But anyway, my 5th grade teacher, I walked in, first day of class, September, right? Up north we start in September. Down here they start in August. Walked into class, I'm probably about, I don't know, that high at 10 years old. And I'm used to all these short little nuns running around in their habits. I walk in, it's the first time I've had a civilian as a teacher. They call them lay teachers, that's a technical name. To us it was a civilian, right? Walked in, and as I looked directly at her, I probably saw her about belly button high. As I looked up, she was about 6'2". Hugely tall woman. And trust me, she wasn't fat. She was tall, she was strong, she had been raised on a farm. And man, she was quicker than the nuns. She'd come up behind you. But as much of a screw up as I was, she was a damn good teacher. She took me aside and said, you know, you're a lot smarter than you let everyone know. Story about me, if I read something, I remember it. If I write it, I remember it. I can recall just about anything. Somehow she figured that out. So what that did was took away my excuse to fail, right? Hey, if the teacher knows you're smart, makes it really difficult to give her an excuse. This teacher, fast forward to 1963, the Pro Football Hall of Fame opens. I walk into this majestic dome shaped like a football. My heels are clicking on the floor. You can just smell the smells of the locker rooms of the NFL with all these busts and jerseys all around that area. And I thought of her. Fast forward a few years, and I get to tell a story. In that story, there were a bunch of NFL players there, and I picked on one of them. And I said, do you remember when you played against the Minnesota Vikings? And this guy was an offensive end for Denver. And he played against the Minnesota Vikings. And I said, your number was 88, right? He goes, yeah. I said, you remember who the number 88 was that played across from you? He goes, yeah. It was the great Alan Page, who's a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, who's a Chief Justice in Minnesota, and one of the hardest hitters ever. And as I told the story, and there were a bunch of NFL people there, I said, now, I just want you to know that when he knocked you down all those times and hit you that hard, it's because he learned how to hit from a girl.